Okay, this is Kenneth Boozer, Irving Fireman for how many years?
38 and a half.
In Irving, Texas.
All in Irving, Texas.
Okay, Kenneth, where did you grow up?
Grew up right here in Irving. Came home from St. Paul Hospital to Cochran Street and lived there till I went to the Marine Corps. Came home from the Marine Corps, went back to Cochran till I bought my first house a few months later. So lived in Cochran all my life, except for when I was in the Corps.
How long were you in the Corps?
Just 3 years.
3 years?
Yeah.
What was your job in the Marine Corps?
I was a cryptographic analyst and communicator.
What is that?
I dealt with top secret stuff that we intercepted from the Russians and try to analyze it and of course communicate messages back and forth and all, but things that we intercepted and we'd try to analyze and try to decode it. So.
Where did you go to high school?
Went to MacArthur. Grew up, started off in A.S. Johnston, about my fourth grade year. I moved to Brandenburg because they built Brandenburg. But little known fact, Brandenburg wasn't totally finished yet, and so they had for the first half of the year, we went to Plymouth Park Methodist Church, had classrooms there, and the same thing for fifth grade. Apparently, they finished the fourth grade classrooms, but then. And so fifth grade started off there too, and then sixth grade was a whole year. But now it's a completely different building. Apparently, it had structural problems, and they redid it. Then went to Travis after that, and then MacArthur. What
activities were you involved with at MacArthur High School?
At MacArthur, I was involved in journalism and wrestling. I started off in band. And then Mr. Colvin came to me in the middle of my sophomore year and said, you can either wrestle or play in the band. If you're going to wrestle, then we're going to move you down to the B band. And I was in the symphonic band. And I said, well, let's see. The wrestling coach is not making me make a choice like that. And he said, well, you might hurt your lips and then wouldn't be able to play. And I said, well, I hadn't hurt my lips yet and everything, but since the wrestling coach then I'll just stay wrestling and not do band at all, because I played band at my church, and my church had did a lot of youth stuff at my church, and most of my activities were at church, but I did wrestling, was in journalism and band freshman and sophomore year.
Were you on the newspaper or yearbook?
I was on the yearbook, but we worked all together and everything as one big journalism department.
So you were back there with Johnny Hurd.
Oh yeah,
Karen Tate.
Hurd's Hurd.
How were you ranked in school?
Oh, I have no clue. I made good grades and stuff that I cared about in high school. In college, I made straight A's, but I cared about it because it was time that I spent away from my family, and I used it as a judge of, how I was utilizing that time that I spent away from my family. But in high school, if I liked something, then I did well in it. If I didn't, I made B's, okay? But, the stuff I liked, I made A's in. So it just depends on how much effort I put into it. And I didn't put as much effort into some things as I did others.
What made you decide to join the Marines?
Well,
that was around Vietnam.
Oh, it was. Yeah, I went in thinking that I was going to, might go over there, even though I knew they were pulling out. They were still sending some people over there, and especially into the area. But in any case, whenever in between my junior and senior year, my sophomore and junior year, and my junior and senior, I did carpenter work for the guy that lived across from me, a guy named Larry Pope. And I got out of high school and started doing carpenter work again. But the economy was in the pits, and Larry was the type of guy that, he'd make a lot of money and then he'd go fishing for a week. I knew I couldn't do that for a living, and and I said, I think I'll go in the Marine Corps and let them teach me something that I can do, and do carpenter work in the daytime and do something else at night, And I thought I wanted to be a policeman, so I signed up to be an MP. But whenever I got into boot camp, they said, with your scores, you'd do really good at this, but it's top secret. We can't tell you what it is, but everybody loves it. Well, I hated it, And I got out of the Marine Corps, and whenever my 3 years was up, I got out, and I went in at a deal where you didn't have to commit to 6 years. I know most people had either 6 years, some in active and some in reserves or something, but I was just in a odd situation right after they quit the draft, and they didn't make me go the full 6 years. So it's kind of strange that I only had to do 3.
They're probably trying to reduce the service.
Well, that was what they were doing. They were, reduction in force type of thing. But in any case, but I got out of the Marine Corps in November of '78, and I went down to City Hall to apply to be a policeman. And they said, well, we aren't accepting applications for policemen today, but we are for firemen. And I mean that quick. I said, let's see, people don't like policemen, call them names and all kinds of stuff. People like firemen. I can do that. And that was by the grace of God, because in retrospect and working closely with the police the way I have, over my career, I recognize that was definitely the grace of God. I wouldn't have liked to be in a policeman.
Did you finish college by the time you joined the fire department?
No, no. I had whenever I got out of high school, I started. I was taking night courses and stuff until I went in the Marine Corps, and and it was tough because I was getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, going out and being on a job site at daylight, and then doing going home for a little while, taking a nap and eating something, and then going to school at night. And I said, man, this is killing me. And little did I know, because after I got out of the Marine Corps, got married, then I went back to college and got my degree. And by then I was doing carpenter work on the side, working 56 hours a week at the fire station, 30 to 40 hours doing carpenter work, and taking a full load, in the 12 in the long semesters and 6 in both summer semesters. And so, and I'd come in and my wife would have my clothes laid out so I could go from the fire department to my, construction, and then I'd come home in the afternoons and she'd have my, my clothes ready for me to jump into to go to school, and she'd throw something in my hand as I went out the door, and when after church on Sunday we'd go to friend's house and she'd go socialize, and I'd lock myself in one of their rooms studying, and did that for 3.5 years, because I did have a few semesters there before I went in the Corps. But it was tough. But yeah, I like I said, I made straight A's because it was a gauge of how, if I was wasting or utilizing properly the time that I was having to spend away from my kids.
So you got your degree?
I got my degree.
What's it in?
I've got a degree in public administration. It's actually emergency administration. I was one of the first graduates up at North Texas, that graduated with emergency administration with a minor in business law.
Ooh. Now, in 1978, what kind of people were the fire department looking for then?
Well, Irving had gone to state civil service in 1975. In 1975 they went to state civil service, and so you basically applied and took the test, and whoever came out number one, then they had the process, and unless they found some reason to boot you, then they had to hire you. So I scored number one on the test by the grace of God, and they called me, about a month later and said, okay, we need you to come down and take the agility test, and I did, and passed that, and a couple of weeks later, I was at the fire station. So it was a quick ride.
What kind of training did you get to be a part of the fire station?
Well, back then, you had on-the-job training. And, I went to the fire. Well, the first thing I did is report to the admin building, which was at City Hall. And they took me down and got me uniforms, got me my firefighting gear, and then took me to one of the fire stations. And they said, there's a fire engine. When that tone goes off, you get on that fire engine, and you do, whenever the engine stops, then you do exactly what that captain says. And so I did. And I rode a couple of shifts with the guy that was there as a fourth man. We rode 3 men to a piece of equipment back then, but for those first 2 shifts, they put me with another guy that had been working, already. And then the third shift, I was it, and I just had to do what the captain said. Now, after they had hired a bunch of people, then we went through a rookie school. But that was actually about 5-6 months later, before I started rookie school. And the first 8 hours of every shift, we would go to the training academy, and we learned hydraulics, and we learned the medical, because firemen respond to medical calls as well, and we learned anything and everything. We learned it because firemen are really the last trade that does everything. I mean, if you got an electric line down, who do you call? You call the fire department. If you're in a car wreck, who do you call? You call the fire department. We do everything. It's kind of crazy.
Do you have paramedic training?
I did. I went to paramedic school in 1979 and got out in January of '80. Rode my last shift New Year's Eve, and then was a paramedic after that. Came back to Irving after that and got on the box. And in Irving, I'd gone to EMT school first, and I went to EMT school pretty quick. Now EMT school is part of rookie school. And nowadays, in fact, it was only about 2 classes after mine that Irving started having a formal class, and they wouldn't let them go to the fire stations until they had gone to rookie school. And most of the time they hold their own, but sometimes they would farm it out if another city was having one and we only had 1 or 2 people or something. But in any case, the driver, you had to be to be on an ambulance, you had to be a driver, which is a promotion from a firefighter. And but after I went to EMT school, then I did ride out of class, which is where if the driver is off, then I would move up as a firefighter, and they would pay me, that driver's pay, for that day that I was working in that rank.
Have you ever been injured?
I was injured several times. Yeah, I've got a bad back, bad knee, bad shoulder.
How did you get these?
Well,
doing what the captain tells you to do.
That and being the captain as well. Just a myriad of things. I've been blown up. My back lasted real well, and I never really had problems with it. I always tried to stay in shape, and I'm fat as a hog right now. But in 2001, I caught a virus around my heart, just an unknown etiology virus, and they put me on steroids for a year. I was on and off steroids for a year, and I gained all this stinking weight. I've never been able to lose it. But before then, I did sit-ups galore, and I always felt if you had a good, strong core, that, it'd protect your back. And I never had back problems. But then I gained that weight, so my sit-ups kind of went by the wayside. So that was 2001, resulting heart surgery to peel the pericardium off in 2008. Fun times. Yeah. But then in January of 2009, that apartment complex that used to be right there by the creek on 6th Street, yeah. They had vacated it. They were fixing to bulldoze it. We had an arsonist going in there and setting fires. And Engine 5, which I was assigned to, was first in. And we went in and I had a firefighter on each side. Normally you'd sound the floor in front of you, make sure there's no holes. But like a dummy, I'm sitting there and I've got a firefighter on each side of me, and I've got the thermal imaging camera, but I'm looking ahead of me instead of below me. And I figure since I've got one on each side that I'm good and don't need to sound the floor. I stepped in a hole. My right leg went in the hole. Whenever I went down, I twisted as I went down and stuff. Of course, got all my gear on. That's about 40 pounds or so by the time you figure your air pack and everything. And it's pitch black. You can't see your hand in front of your face. And, those thermal imaging cameras that we got about the last third of my career, they were nice, But in any case, from that point on, I had back problems. And ended up having back surgery here just this past February. So February of 19, ended up him putting a cage around the lower part of my back. And he said there were little chips in there from having taken a fall. Well, that was the only time I fell, But the city said, "Oh, it's degenerative disc."
It is now.
It is now. But the other things, I was burned, I had a building collapse on me, several times I've had, either a ceiling or one time the entire roof collapsed on me, in fact, twice that happened. One time, just that sixth sense, the voice of God, I say it was, told me, you need to, pull these guys back. I had my firefighter and a driver right there, and just something said, we need to get out of here now. And I grabbed them and just started backing up as quick as I could. And the whole, thing was lofted up and it fell down in. And that's actually, the second collapse that I was in, it was really bad. We had gone up to some apartment complex up off of 161 and MacArthur. And we were first in, and my firefighter, Sean Reddish, when we first attacked the fire on the bottom floor, apparently his air bottle was leaking, and we knocked that down. And I came out, and he said, "Captain, I got to get another air bottle." So by that time, Engine 9 was there. I was on Engine 11 that day, and Engine 9 was there, and so I grabbed the firefighter, James Kraft, off of that, and we went up to the second floor to, see if it penetrated into the second floor. Open the door, pitch black, can't see your hand in front of your face, and so I know it's at the very least smoke is in there, probably fire. And go in, and he's pulling hose at the door. He's about 15, 20 feet behind me, pulling hose, so I can have enough hose to advance. And all of a sudden, it went from pitch black to fire all around me. The roof had collapsed, and I'm not hearing, but they're calling a mayday on the outside, telling everybody to get out. And James is sitting at the door yelling, and I could hear him yelling, but it was hard to because everything was still falling. And whenever the thing fell in, it knocked the hose and the radio out of my hand, so I couldn't call for help. And the hose is your lifeline. It not only helps you put the fire out, but it helps you get back out if you can't put the fire out. Well, when it knocked the hose out of my hand, I couldn't find it. And I couldn't find my radio to call for help. And I'm sitting there saying, "Oh my heavens."
How'd you get out?
And I just took a minute and said, "Okay, Lord, if this is my time, then if not, you got to help me here." And I reached down and I not only grabbed the hose, but I grabbed it at the right place, and I had the nozzle basically right there at me, and so I knew which way I needed to go, and I literally had to fight my way back out. And James said later, he said, "Man, I thought we were fixing to go to a funeral." Oh. And the crazy thing was, the next day we were supposed to take my daughter up to college because she's starting college at University of North Texas the next day. We were taking all her stuff up there. Mm-hmm. And so we stopped back by that fire, and it's all overhauled now, but and my radio was down on the bottom floor.
You find it?
And it was just a hole, but it was it was burned up. But I found what was left of it. It was all melted and stuff and in a pile. But it was down on the first floor. Well, that had happened whenever I was on the second floor, but there was nothing but sky above where that radio was.
How many times did you come close to death?
Oh, I don't know, Richard. I was in another fire down on Westwood, and we went in, and early on in my career, we had a guy named James Presnall get killed. And he got killed because I think they were a little bit too aggressive. Irving is a very aggressive fire department, and I was aggressive. But Presnall went in, and he went for the fire instead of pulling the ceiling above him to make sure that the fire wasn't above him. Okay? And so I always made it a practice to make sure that I was somewhat safe. Now, it didn't always work, because if it's pitch black, you can't see, then, you don't always know. But I tried whenever I could to make it safe. On that fire on Westwood, we went in, and we get there, and the house is just blowing and going. It's on fire. And we don't know, and there's nobody there to tell us what the deal is, And so, there's a fire hydrant right there close, and so my driver's connected to the hydrant. We went ahead and take the line and go in, and my firefighter is a guy named Mike Suzuki, and, real go-getter, and he grabbed the hose, the jerk. I usually like to grab the nozzle because that's where the fun is, But in any case, he grabbed, and he's wanting to go in, and I'm saying, Mike, we're pulling that ceiling before we go further. And we were about 10, 12 feet inside the thing when all of a sudden it explodes.
Boom.
Come to find out, some painters had been in there, and it was cold, it was wintertime. Some painters had been in there using lacquer thinner to clean the cabinets, to strip the cabinets down. Didn't turn the pilot out on the gas water heater, which was right there in the same room. They had 2 5-gallon buckets of lacquer thinner just boiling over with the fumes, I don't know if you're familiar, but fumes will literally come over the top and go down the thing. Well, when those fumes went across the floor and hit that thing, then it flashed. It burned them. They took off to the hospital. Didn't say hi, anything to anybody. Fortunately, there's a guy out mowing his yard, about 3-4 houses over, and caddy corner, and sees, the fire, calls the fire department. So we get there, like I say, and don't know what's going on. About the time we go in there, had we not started to pull ceiling, okay, then we might have been hurt really bad, been deeper, because we could see where the majority of the fire was, and had I let him attack that, then we might have been blown up. As it was, we were lifted up and knocked down. And when we went in, all the bricks were on the house. When we came out, they were laying on the ground because it had literally moved the walls out about that much, all the way around the house. And so it was just one of those things, by the grace of God, that we survived. So how many times? I don't know. I was pretty aggressive, and more than once.
Well, you probably have a good idea how many injuries you got from the fire department, from one of those fires.
I don't know. Definitely more than a half dozen,
Okay. Yeah.
Just one thing or another. Some, some minor, some worse. Whenever I hurt my back in that falling in that hole, I ended up going home that night,
Yeah.
So,
Well, but in spite of your injuries, your work record was pretty good.
Well, it depends on who you ask. I was the president of the union for 10 years, okay? And so I butted head with 2 fire chiefs. I had, 2 fire chiefs that loved me, and the current fire chief, we get along great, but they're good fire chiefs. If we had fire chiefs that were dishonest and lacked integrity, then I butted heads with them. To me, if you can't trust a fireman, you can't trust anybody. I based my life, and I raised my kids like this too. I said, I base my life having to trust that guy next to me. If I can't trust what you're saying, I can't trust you with my life. You know what I mean?
I do.
And we had a fire chief that said, well, we can just get stuff, and he would tell them that he was buying buying this type of hose, and he'd buy that type of hose, and he didn't mind at the very least stretching the truth. instead of being totally honest.
You couldn't trust him.
No, you can't trust him. And how can you work with somebody like that if you can't trust them? So I was instrumental in trying to get 2 fire chiefs fired, and so the last one, he actually put me off, trying to fire me because of it.
He put the union president off the clock?
Well, for that one, I wasn't president anymore.
Oh, okay.
This was after I'd stepped down and somebody else was president, and I was helping. But I went to a union meeting and I spoke out and said, he's done this, he's done this, he's done this. And one of the assistant chiefs was at that union meeting. And this assistant chief called me in, and started sitting there trying to say, well, you've done this. And I said, no, wait a minute. I haven't done anything on duty. I said, everything that you're talking about, I did off duty. I said, in off duty, I have freedom of speech. Said, on duty, I'm Captain Ken Boozer. Off duty, I'm Private Citizen Ken Boozer.
Now, weren't you the youngest fire department chief in Irving?
No, not chief, captain.
Captain, sorry.
Yeah, and I made captain quick. I made captain in 8.5 years, okay? And you got to spend 2 years in every rank, minimum, all right, by civil service law. And, there are a couple of exceptions, but in any case, I was just very fortunate that things hit just right. I spent the most time, other than captain, as a driver, and that was in between paramedic school, and I loved my partner. And I would have stayed a driver, but my partner, because I loved working with him, but he says, Booz, he said, I'm not going to be here forever. He was an older guy, and he said, I'm not going to, it won't be long before I retire. He says, you need to look around and see who's promoting. You need to take those tests. And so I did. And so I got promoted off of the first time I ever took the test, up through captain, and made number 1 on all of them. Whenever I made lieutenant, I made number 1 on the raw score, but they counted seniority in there as well. And another lieutenant, I had been there 2.99 years. He had .0001 points more seniority than I did.
That hurts.
Oh no, it was fine because I still got promoted just a couple of months later.
Okay.
So
that's good. That worked out.
Yeah, it worked out.
How did you manage to get involved with the union?
Well, initially, I worked on committees, helping rewrite the Constitution and everything. I write very well, and so I felt like that was some way that I could serve and stuff, and I didn't want them voting on stuff without me attending and knowing what was going on, so I would go to the meetings. But then that first chief, of the 2 chiefs that I was telling you about, the first chief that I was telling you about that I was instrumental and that I was a president whenever he got fired, he decided he was going to privatize the fire department. The ambulance service, and take it out of the fire department. Well, I was familiar with how poorly some of the private ambulance services matched up to the fire department run ones. The fire department run ones just had a whole lot better quality care and people, that were providing care. And I said, that's not for Irving. And so I got involved in trying to prevent him from doing that. And after I did that, then the guys said, oh, you need to run for president. Then the guys said, oh, you need to run for president. So I did, and so the rest is history. I mean, I got elected that first time, and I kept running until I got tired, and said, I'm tired. I've done it 10 years. Y'all need to find somebody else. One of the things which I held on to that I was pretty proud of that was lost right after I stepped down was parity with the police. The police were foolish in that they didn't realize, how much of a benefit to them it was to have pay parity with them. Now, it wasn't true parity in that we didn't have, the same pay for the same rank. I mean, we had to take one more promotional test to get to the same place that they did and so forth. But there were certain ranks where the pay was similar or was, the same. In any case, make a long story short, I maintained that, and, 2 weeks after I wasn't president anymore, they got rid of it. Simply because the president didn't go to the meeting, and whenever they said, oh, well, the firefighters are okay with this, instead of him being there to say, no, we're not, they got rid of it.
Looking back on your career, is there anything that you would have done different?
Yeah. I don't regret being the time that I spent in the as the union the association president at all, but what I should have done the first time I was at the last rank that I fought fire. Above me it was purely administrative. You'd sit in a car and command a fire and so forth, but you didn't fight fire anymore. And the first time an opening, there was only 7 battalion chiefs in the city. And so the openings weren't as frequent as they were for the other ranks. And the first opening came available. I'd only been a captain for 5 years, and I was 33. And I said, man, I don't want to ride the chief's car for another 30 years before I can retire, and not fight fire anymore. I took the test, but I didn't study for it. Okay, and I still came out number 3, and I was only 3 points behind the guy that made number 2 without even studying. Had I studied, now the guy that made number 1, he had studied his rear off and he's plenty sharp. But I think had I studied, I could have beat the number 2 guy. And I would have been a battalion chief, another $600 a month, the rest of my career, that next 30 years plus, probably wouldn't have hurt myself as much. I wouldn't have been able to do the union stuff. I'd already been president for a couple of years, but still, it would have changed my career tremendously. I mean, who knows? I mean, where I could have gone from there, because nowadays some of the guys that were battalion chiefs, they're assistant chiefs and so forth. So who knows? But I regret that. It might have saved my body. Definitely would have been more money. Oh, yeah. And that's always good.
That's nice. Well, now talk a little bit about Karen and how she's helped your career.
Well, I tell you what, especially while I was president of the association, people would sit there, and my wife she's smart. She's plenty smart. And she's not just somebody who, a little Miss Housewife and does nothing. She's plenty smart gal. And she was very easy to see everything and the reasoning, why that I had the opinions that I did. She could see it right there along. I mean, we talked our entire married life, and I married her. I got on the fire department in April of 79 and married her in March of 80. Okay, so she's been there almost as long as I was. Well, now longer since since I retired. But in any case, but she was there. Number one, she supported me, as I said, whenever I was going to school. Okay. Number two, she took care of the house and everything while I was gone every third day. Because, firemen work 24 and we're off 48. But that 24 hours, you're gone. Totally gone. You don't come home, and of course I lived in Irving, and so that made it a little bit easier. If it was something really bad, then I might be able to take the engine or the ambulance if I was in district. If I was out of district, if I was up on the north end of town, she had to deal with whatever emergency. Okay, and she did an excellent job taking care of the household, the kids, and all of that while I was there. So she was a support there. Plus, then whenever I got into the association and was doing that, she was every bit as vocal as I was, if not more so. Now, we'd have people that would think that she was parroting something or she was saying something for me. I'm telling you, that girl has her own opinions, and they're very well founded. She doesn't just sit there and draw conclusions and have opinions that are based on nothing. She's, like I said, pretty sharp, and so they need to listen to her probably more than me.
Well, how many of your kids went into the fire department?
My youngest son followed me. My others are in IT and information technology, and they're both pretty successful. But my youngest son, he got on the fire department in 2008. And he stayed a firefighter so far, but part of it was he didn't want to go to paramedic school, but now they made him go to paramedic school, so I'm thinking he'll go ahead and promote up now, because now.
Well, is there anything you would like to say to the general public about your career in the fire department or what kids might want or need to know?
Well, I can tell you, number one, you need to know as much as you can. If you're a kid looking to get into fire service, learn as much as you can about everything, because like I said, we had to learn about everything. It's a wide variety of things, all the way from medical to water. You say, water, what's so big about water? Hydraulics is a science. And but you also have to know about dealing with people and communicating with people, and and human nature and how to deal with that, especially if you want to promote up. But the fire service is not like it used to be. Whenever I got on the fire department, it was rare that we didn't sleep most of the night. Nowadays, it's rare that you do ever sleep all night long. Okay? And nowadays, the guys are going pretty much the entire 24 hours worth of time. They'll get a little bit of downtime. They might catch a meal, but I can't tell you how many meals we left on the table and it got cold because we had to go out on a call. And you might be gone, 30 minutes. You might be gone the rest of the shift. You never knew. Okay? The guys now in Irving has gone from a suburban city to an urban city. And that actually the staffing is still that of a suburb. And the citizens need to recognize they're going to have to start investing more in their fire department, because we're having more and more fires. We're having more and more accidents. We've got 5 major highways going through this city. Okay? And that keeps us busy, just the accidents alone. Then you start talking about the fires, and then 70% of our calls are medical. We've gone, whenever I was on the ambulance, we had 3 ambulances in town, and we'd average 6 to 8 runs a shift. Nowadays, okay, they've got 10 ambulances in town, and they average 8 to 10, sometimes 12 runs a shift. Those guys are running their wheels off. Now, they do it different. You don't have the same 2 guys assigned. You've got 2 guys assigned, but the engine company that's at that house, they'll also switch those people off, so they're not having to ride every single shift on the ambulance. That makes it a little bit better, But you need that entire 48 hours to recoup. Whenever I got on, we had guys that went off and did carpenter work on their days off and plumbing, and they don't do that anymore. Okay, because they're so tired, they go home and go to bed. There's a few guys that have part-time jobs, but it's something they can do, like mowing lawns or something, where they don't have to be there, because they don't have a homeowner or a contractor that's sitting there expecting them to be there, on those 2 days that they're not at the fire station. And in any case, so it's changed. Your taxpayer dollars are well spent for your fire service. Okay, that's probably the best thing that I can say to the public, to let them know, about the fire department. They're highly motivated. The Irving Fire Department is highly professional. Little known fact, we've been rated the 2nd best fire department in the nation.
Really?
And that's pretty good. In Texas, we were the very first one to get an ISO 1 rating. Okay, that's pretty good. You know, it's very beneficial to your insurance. It lowers your homeowner's insurance rates.
Wow.
Okay, it lowers business insurance rates. You know, so we've got an excellent response time in Irving. 3 to 5 minutes is excellent. You've got a lot of cities, where 5 minutes is they're lucky to get there in 5 minutes. And most places we can get 3 to 5 minutes. Now if you've got somebody out on a call and somebody calls right next to where they would be, then it's not necessarily that way. And you're going to have those incidents, but for the most part, you're very well protected in the city of Irving. I am very proud of the Irving Fire Department and the fact that I was able to get to a point I could retire from it.
Right. There you go. Okay, well thanks you.
Well, you're welcome, buddy.
Thanks for your service as a Marine.
Yeah, my son says, Dad, you spent 38 and a half years on the fire department and 3 years in the Marine Corps, and you're more proud of the Marine Corps. Why is that? I said, son, you just had to stand on those little yellow footprints. One of the questions that you didn't ask was about the physical shape.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I always, like I said, kept in shape. And whenever I first got on, a lot of the old guys didn't do it. I did. I exercised. And had I not been in that good a shape, number one, the doctor said whenever I caught that pericarditis that it might have killed me.
Yeah.
Because my heart was literally that big, filled with fluid.
Ooh.
But number two, nowadays they all stay in shape. About 92 or so, they started every year taking a mandatory physical fitness test that's a tough test. It's every bit as tough as any of the training I went through in the Marine Corps.
Ooh.
And so all of your firefighters are and yeah, I took it right up until the time I retired, and it was tough. But I was able to do it, and the guys that can't do it, they put them off on administrative duty. If 3 times they don't pass that test, they're gone.
Ooh.
So different standards nowadays. They're physically fit too.
All right, thanks, Kenneth.